5R rifling, semi-auto velocity loss, and adjusting your stock. This week on Mail Call Mondays. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. This is another glorious Monday, and we've got questions, so let's get to them. Our first question comes from Cameron. Cameron asks, 5R rifling, is it really that much better, and why? Well, Cameron, 5R rifling describes a very broad range of products or rifle barrels. What we're talking about generally when we talk about 5R rifling is we are talking about a rifling style that has 5 lands and 5 grooves, and the transition from the lands to the grooves is not a steep edge like you would find on traditional rifling. It's smoothed out and rounded out just a little bit more. Now, 5R rifling has a couple of stated benefits. One of which being easier cleaning, less fouling builds up because there's not a sharp transition from land to groove. The next one is that it damages the projectile less as it goes through, and the projectile is supposed to seal better. So the less damage and sealing better aids to more velocity and less variance on the bullet, more accuracy on the bullet. So now we get into, is it better? Well, the thing is, 5R rifling just simply describes a style of rifling. How that rifling is made, how the barrel is made, how the barrel is treated afterwards, the tolerances the barrel is held to, and the finishing that the barrel goes through all have a greater degree of effect on the accuracy of that rifle than the style of rifling. I worry less about the style of rifling and more about how that rifle's finished, that the barrel is hand lapped, and that it is chambered by a competent gunsmith, and that all those other steps are taken care of. That's really what I'm concerned with. So when you're worried about rifling, just really look at who's producing the barrel. Take a premium barrel manufacturer like Krieger, Rock Creek, just tons of other ones out there. I can't even name them all off the top of my head. Bartley, Broughton, any of those will do just fine. Take one of those barrels, have a competent gunsmith chamber it up and install it on your rifle, and you should be good to go. Now, when we're talking about 5R rifling as far as the Remington 700s, if you're talking about a standard barrel versus getting a Remington 700 from the factory that has a 5R barrel, usually those 5R barrels are held to a little bit higher tolerances. First of all, you're getting a stainless barrel. You are getting the 5R style rifling, and those tend to be found on Remington's more premium line rifles. So the chances of getting a more accurate 5R are better than getting a more accurate standard SPS varmint or 700P or something of that nature. So if you want to pay a little extra for the 5R, that's fine. But just remember, barrels are the wear item, so you're paying extra for something that you probably are not going to get a return on that investment if you decide to sell it later after you've burned that barrel out. So those are a couple things to keep in mind, and I hope that answers your question. Terry asks, reloading 223 for semi-autos, crimp or no crimp? Well, Terry, I don't crimp any of my ammunition for my precision rifle. So if I'm loading for a precision AR-15, I'm not going to crimp those bullets because I'm going to take some care when I'm loading them into the magazine. I'm usually not running 30 rounds at a really fast pace through that magazine. And when I load my semi-auto ammunition, I usually load it to at least 2 thousandths neck tension. And that's enough that if I take that cartridge with the bullet and I press it really hard against the table, I don't get any setback on the bullet. So I'm fairly certain that while firing through the magazine, I'm not going to get any setback of those bullets. Now, if it's ammunition that you're going to load up for maybe a defensive situation, you're going to throw it in a spam can and keep it on the shelf for decades, then it may be a good idea to go ahead and get that extra confidence, I would say, that the bullet's not going anywhere, and go ahead and crimp it. But that will have an effect on the accuracy. Any amount of tension that you put between the neck and the bullet is going to have an effect. If you're crimping it hard enough to deform the jacket on the bullet, that's going to have an effect on accuracy. And crimping is going to affect how the bullet is released from the neck of the case. So precision, I go with no crimp. I just adjust my neck tension to make sure I'm getting the grip on the bullet that I want. If it's something that you're going to keep around forever and ever, then use cantilevered bullets and crimp them. If you're not using cantilevered bullets, you shouldn't be crimping anyway, because you run the possibility of actually damaging the jacket. The one exception is the Lee factory crimp die, which is supposed to be able to crimp with no cantilever and very little effect on the actual jacket of the bullet you're crimping onto. Robert asks, velocity loss from bolt to gas. I've noticed that 170 foot per second loss from my 20-inch bolt gun to my 20-inch gas gun using the same .308 ammunition. Seems like a lot. Is that consistent with what you have experienced in the past? Well, Robert, it's really hard to say. I would say 170 foot per second loss, there's more going on there than just semi-automatic versus a bolt gun. The biggest thing that you got to remember is that from barrel type to barrel type, you can get a velocity change. I noticed that, for instance, when I started shooting my 21-inch Noveske barreled AR-10, that rifle actually had a faster velocity with the same charge weights than my 26-inch Remington 700 varmint rifle. And it's just because the style of rifling in the barrel and the degree to the barrel is finished. Those Noveske barrels are lapped, so they are generally smoother. They're not as rough as the Remington barrels, so you get a velocity increase from that. Now, you can't really compare your bolt gun to your gas gun unless both those rifles have barrels from the same manufacturer with the same rifling style, the same finishing, and the same chamber cut in them. If that were the case, I think you would see a very, very tiny difference between the velocity of the bolt gun and the velocity of the gas gun. In fact, those of you guys that have gas guns, if you want to see what kind of velocity loss you're getting, just simply turn the gas system off. We're going to do that here shortly towards the end of our Ma-10 build. We're going to shut the gas system off on the Ma-10 and show you if you're really getting a drastic gas loss through the gas system or not. What you have to remember though is that bullet is almost out of the barrel by the time you're venting any of that gas. You only have that last little bit of barrel between the gas port and the muzzle, where a very small portion of gas is being vented and no longer pushing on the back of the bullet. So if you notice any velocity loss at all, you'll notice very little bit, and we'll show you that later on. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Philip asks, I'm new to the precision rifle scene and just got my first fully adjustable stock. Can you go over the proper way of setting it up to determine length of pull, etc.? Okay, Philip, right here in front of me we have our Cadex Strike 30 dual chassis, which is a fully adjustable buttstock on it. We can adjust the height of the butt pad, we can adjust the length of pull, we can adjust the height of the cheek piece, we can even adjust the cheek piece forward and back. But the only adjustment that this stock doesn't have that some others have is I can't adjust the cheek piece from side to side. It is fixed in the center of the stock. Now, what I generally do when I adjust a adjustable buttstock is the first adjustment I run is the length of pull. And the length of pull is from the trigger face to the end of the buttstock. And what you need to take into consideration when you set that is the length of your arm from the inside of your elbow to the pad of your finger when you have it at that hard 90-degree angle and engaged on the front of the trigger face. So that length, elbow to the inside of the pad of your finger, is what you want your length of pull to be. And an easy way to do that is you just simply set the butt pad on the inside of your elbow, have your trigger bent, and that should perfectly engage the trigger. And as you can see here, this length of pull is set for that just perfectly on me. Once we get the length of pull set and we have our scope installed, now we can get on the rifle and we set up the scope front to back. So you get your eye relief on the scope set to where you have no shadow around it, you have a perfect ring, and that tells you your length of pull, eye relief is dialed in. Now when you set your cheek on your cheek piece here, that's generally going to be the next thing that we're going to adjust. When you set your cheek on the comb or on the cheek piece and you look through your scope, if you see a shadow, you're going to adjust the height until you have no shadow top to bottom, till the sight picture is centered in that black ring, and that will be your comb height, and you'll have that locked in. The last thing that I will generally mess with, if the stock has the ability to slide the butt pad up or down, I will get in a nice tight prone position and I will set that to where it gives me the best feeling in the pocket of the shoulder. I usually have to run it high, and it almost always ends up right about even with the comb on the stock. That's a real quick down and dirty on how I adjust it. We're planning on doing a video later in our shooting skills series where I'll show you step by step how I go through and get it dialed in. And hopefully we'll get some better video and maybe some through the scope shots on what we need to do when we adjust our eye relief. So hope that answers your question on that. Jordan asks, any AR-15 muzzle devices around that actually protect the shooter, i.e. relatively safe to shoot a few rounds without ear pro, like in a hunting situation? Well, Jordan, your best bet, if it's legal in your state, is to just go ahead and purchase a sound suppressor or silencer for your rifle. That's going to be the best thing to try to reduce any damage to your hearing. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind though is unless you're using subsonic ammunition, you will get a sonic crack even when using a sound suppressor. Silencers on rifles are not really ear safe. They reduce the concussion. They're kinder to people around you, to residences around you, but they will not save your ears like a good set of ear pro will. As far as hunting situations, what I would really recommend to use a set of electronic ears like the Peltor Tac Sports or the Howard Light Impact Sports. Both of those are low cost. They're not super cheap, but they're cheaper than a lot of the muzzle devices for AR-15s that are out there right now. And they will amplify the ambient noises so you can hear things in the woods better than you would with your regular ears, but yet they will still attenuate rifle shots so that you don't have to worry about blowing your eardrums out. They really are a great thing to wear out in the woods. Plus, if you're working in really cold environments, they'll help keep your ears warm too. So added benefit there. But I would definitely suggest looking into those. If you're really on a budget, then look into something like the Surefire ear protection. I have a set of Surefire EP3s that we've been reviewing that I wore all yesterday at a family trap shoot, and they work very well for allowing me to hear voices and carry on conversations, but muffle out the sound of the shotguns. They're really not expensive, so at a bare minimum, I would suggest those. Anything else, though, you're going to run the risk of damaging your hearing. Once you've damaged your hearing, it's gone for life. You will not get all of your hearing back when you start incurring ear damage. I have constant ringing in my ears that I will have for the rest of my life because I didn't take care of my hearing early on. So I suggest you guys take care of yours. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't hear your grandkids speaking. David asks, when building an AR-15, the importance of headspace. Well, David, headspace is important for the safe functioning of your rifle. And when we're talking about headspace, what we're talking about is the distance from the shoulder of the cartridge to the bolt face. If that headspace is too long, then you can run into case head separation where the brass is not able to stretch quick enough to take up the space in the case. And when that happens, you'll usually get a rupture around the case head, and all that gas will come blasting out, and it can injure you or damage the rifle. When you build a rifle, at a minimum, you want to get a field headspace gauge. You want to drop that into your chamber and make sure that the bolt will not close on a field gauge. If it will not close on a field gauge, then the rifle is going to be safe to fire. Now, if it does close on a field gauge, then you're going to need to probably, if you have a bucket of bolts that you can go through some bolts and see if you can find a bolt that will be a little bit tighter. If not, then that's going to be a problem a gunsmith is probably going to need to solve. Luckily, through all the ARs that I've built, I've never run into one that the headspace is so large that it would be unsafe to fire, that would actually close on a field gauge. I will sometimes get ARs that will close on a go gauge, close on a no-go gauge, and that means that they are at the large end of headspace. They probably won't have as long a life when you start wearing out that barrel extension, but I haven't had any yet that would close on the field gauge. So if you're actually building ARs and you're doing a number of them, make sure you at least get a field gauge. If not, get together with a bunch of buddies and buy one. They're really not that expensive, and they're a great tool to have. Barring that, your next best bet is, especially if you're building a precision AR, is buy your barrel from a company that will sell you a matched barrel and bolt, so that they've actually done their homework. They've actually gone through and made sure that the bolt that you're getting will headspace correctly, and then you're going to be good to go. And our last question for the week comes from Daniel at POI Tactical, and he asks, what projects are you working on currently, and what can we expect for the future? Well, we're constantly changing up stuff that we're working on. We're constantly getting things in here. We are working on the next step in our Precision Rifle Skills series, so look for that. I have the next installment of our improved AK build that needs to get the editing finished on it so we can get it out. I've got a couple of product reviews that have come in. I need to wrap up the product review on the Bushnell 1-4, and we have the Leupold VXR Patrol 3-9 that I need to get done. It's currently on a rifle, and we've been shooting that. If you're on our Facebook page, you've seen a couple of pictures of that going out. And we just got done assembling and shooting the SLR Rifle Works Intrepid Key Mod handguard, and we're going to wrap up the review on that. Every day we tend to get new stuff in. We got a set of these really nifty looking blocks here. These are the Last Stand shooting stands, and what they are is they are a really nifty plastic, kind of a rubber type material. And they are designed to allow you to take 1/2-inch rebar and stick 1/2-inch rebar through here, and they will make an A-frame type thing. You do one piece of rebar on either side and then 2 pieces of rebar across the top between them. And they allow you to set up a nice swing set type target stand. We've got these in. We've got some steel from JC Steel targets that we still need to paint and get hung. I actually got the rebar the other day and got the wrong size rebar, so I have to run back and get 1/2-inch rebar. Make sure you get 1/2-inch rebar if you're using them. 5/8 rebar will not fit. Once we get some 1/2-inch rebar and we'll get them out to the field and do some shooting on them, we'll report back to you, but they actually look to be a pretty nifty deal here. Rebar is fairly cheap, so if one of your buddies puts a hole through it, you can carry extra rebar out to the range with you and set your target back up. And these are designed from a very similar material to the target blocks or the rubber targets that you see out there. And they're designed to be able to take some minimal hits. So if one of your idiot friends puts a bullet through one of the Last Stands, they should hold up fairly well. And of course, we're going to test that too. So we'll do what you're not supposed to do and put a bullet through one of those. So that's some of the projects that we have going on right now, and we are trying to work to get them out to you as quickly as possible. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you guys have liked our video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And we really need you to share these videos. It helps our channel grow. Our ad revenue has been tanking here lately, so added viewership really helps us support the project and keep things going. And until next time, get out and shoot!